And welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm David Patton. Joining us is the man many pundits believe will be the next junior U.S. Senator from Alaska, Fairbanks attorney and grassroots conservative Joe Miller. Congratulations on your big win over Senator Lisa Murkowski last night, Joe. Were you surprised she conceded?
They're still ballots to be counted. I thought it was very much an honorable thing to do. Very impressed with it. It came as somewhat of a surprise, yes.
Now, you may need to mend some fences with the GOP establishment in Alaska, given that you're considered, a Tea Party type, grassroots conservative candidate. Are you planning to do that, or is it really up to them to mend fences with you?
Hey, it really is a unity thing. I think it will take both of us to come together, and I think that's going to happen. I mean, the message that is coming out from the Joe Miller campaign is one that conservatives of all stripes can embrace. So I think it's going to be natural for them to get behind the campaign. We certainly hold no hard feelings or animosity and look forward to working together as a party to make sure that we win in November.
Democrats are already working overtime trying to define you for voters, to frame the election. Joe Miller is too extreme, they're saying. What's your strategy going to be to keep them from kind of pigeonholing you?
Well, really, I guess I'd like to speak first to the extreme comment. I mean, frankly, if they characterize me as extreme, they have to do the same for the founders. I mean, we're just asking to restore basically, the republic to what the founders intended it to be. And but the strategy is actually one of just getting the message out. It's a common sense message. It has bipartisan appeal. It is one that returns power back to the states, reduces the power of the central government.
In your race, you received obviously high-profile endorsements. Former Governor Huckabee, former Governor Palin, also about $600,000 of money flowed in from Tea Party Express. Other than that grassroots network, the word of mouth that's critical to winning a primary in Alaska, what would you say was the number one factor that led to your win?
There's not a number one factor. It would be disingenuous for me to say that. It was all of these factors together. You take one of those factors out, it would have been a loss. The volunteer network, second to none. You take that out, we would have lost. If you would have taken out Governor Palin's endorsement, we wouldn't have had the national splash that gave us the attraction and gave us, the additional endorsements of the Tea Party. Certainly Governor Huckabee's endorsement. We had a number of in-state endorsements, from prominent political leaders. We had a national radio talk show host. We had local talk show hosts. Again, I couldn't think of pulling one of those endorsements or one of those assists in this campaign and us still having the success we had. I mean, it really was a perfect storm of all of these folks and groups getting together to push forward the campaign.
Turning to some of the issues that are going to come up in the general election, you've talked a lot about decreasing the flow of federal dollars into Alaska. I think we're going to probably see that for states across the United States. And you've also said the way to accomplish that is by getting the federal government to give back some of its huge land holdings in Alaska. How would you accomplish that as a senator, getting them to give that back, and how will that serve to balance Alaska's budget?
Well, I mean, it's going to require some coalition building. I mean, it's not just Alaska that's under the thumb of the federal government, but it's many other states as well. Many of the western states are in a similar predicament of what we call federal fiefdoms, where the national government owns most of the land holdings or significant land holdings within those states. And there's wonderful natural resources in those areas that can be developed for economic benefit, but it's also a matter of the federal regulatory burden and reducing that dramatically. Again, looking at the role of the central government far outside the bounds of what I believe the Constitution intended, restricting the federal government's heavy glove or heavy hand on the states is another way by which these economies get underway and begin producing again. Frankly, the belt tightening, like you indicated, it's going to go on nationwide whether we like it or not. It's just a fiscal reality. You can't sit back with, well over $13 trillion of absolute debt, unfunded future obligations, and over $100 trillion, and say that things are going to continue as they always been. The age of the entitlement state is absolutely over, and I believe that is a recognition that the new leadership that's being elected this fall is going to bring to the Congress. And the question is whether or not we're going to have the strong leadership necessary to turn the country into the direction it needs to go, which means power transferred back to the states, land back to the states, increased regulatory control, or I should say the regulatory controls transferred over to the states. Those are all things that can bring about, I think, a change dramatically economically for the country and put us ahead. And getting rid of the entitlement state, of course, helps us get ahead so that our people will go to work again and be the producers they can be.
What about the Bush tax cuts? Should all of the Bush tax cuts be continued in your mind?
Absolutely. And not only that, of course, I'm not much of a fan of the IRS anyway. I think the fair tax, flat tax, those are all wonderful options that ought to be considered. Obviously, getting the central government out of the primary role that it's in, will reduce the tax burden. But we also ought to look at different manners by which we conduct taxation at the central government level. And the fair tax, one of the reasons why I'm an advocate for it is that it takes out the taxes on production, makes our goods more competitive internationally. Also allows the American people to see exactly what they're getting taxed, and it's fair. I mean, if you spend a lot, you consume a lot, you'll get taxed accordingly. If you don't, then you get taxed accordingly. Live like a king, get taxed like a king. If not, obviously the fair system prevails. And so there are lots and lots of benefits to that. But I'm an advocate of looking at all these different systems or approaches to taxation at the central level that gets the IRS out of the leading role it's in and out of the, I think, bureaucratic burden that is created by that dominant role of the IRS.
There's a lot of talk, Joe, and I'm sure you've heard this, that your victory in Alaska has shook up and maybe even rattled a little bit some in the GOP establishment. I wanted to get your take on what you think the proper attitude of the grassroots conservative today, the Tea Party person, should be towards the GOP establishment, whether it's the NRC or the NSRC. What should Tea Party folks try to actually take over at this point, the establishment Republican Party?
Well, I don't know if taking over is the right word. What I think we need to do is ensure that these common sense ideals that are being spread by these groups are adopted by those in power, whether they be Republican or Democrat. I think that the message that is being spread, that of returning the republic back to its constitutional foundations, is absolutely something that can put the Republican Party back on track. I mean, it's something that if embraced, it could allow the Republican Party to provide the answers to a nation that's in crisis right now. So really it's the option of those in the establishment, if they want to continue or if they want to be in a leadership position in this nation, they should look at these ideals that are being pushed by these activists, consider them, I think, embrace them, and then I think lead this country out of the crisis point it's in.
Newly minted GOP nominee for the U.S. Senate seat in Alaska, Joe Miller. Thank you for joining us, Joe, and thank you for watching Newsmax TV.